Go back. We do have some breaking news regarding a deal, and a very interesting one at that, one that David Faber has been reporting on this whole time. Now we have some finality, I think, David, right?
We do. Endeavor, of course, the large multifaceted firm, of course, with its control ownership of TKO, the combination of UFC, which you know well, Scott, and World Wrestling, is going to be going private. Now, this is not a surprise, except in the timing, because, frankly, many investors in Endeavor had anticipated that the company would, in fact, be taken private some time back by its control shareholder, Silver Lake, the large private equity firm, which said it was looking at doing a deal many months ago. In the intervening time, the stock has sort of traded in a range, let's call it in the 20s or so. Originally, an expectation had been, and a hope had been, that perhaps a go private price would be 30 or more. That is not the case. $27.50 a share in cash. That still says, they say, represents a 55% premium to the unaffected price of $17.72. That was back in late October again, when there was frustration on the part of Endeavor's management, led by Ari Emanuel and Mark Shapiro, at the share price that then was soon followed by at least the talk of a potential take private by Silver Lake and some language to that effect. But, Scott, we've been waiting for quite some time for the actual deal. There was a question about, well, is the financing taking longer? It's a large equity check, given the $13+ billion in equity value we're talking about here. And so Silver Lake seemingly took its time to line up the appropriate investors to back the equity side of the transaction, including, of course, the debt side. You also will be seeing here the rolling in of ownership stakes of Mr. Emanuel and Mr. Shapiro as well. I'm checking some of the language here to make sure that is still the case, but I'm fairly certain that, in fact, it is. And, you know, we'll have to wait and see how happy or not shareholders are.
Yeah, it's halted right now, so we'll get a quick look when it opens.
Exactly. In terms of the performance of the special committee here, which obviously negotiated on their behalf, kind of a tricky situation where when you're negotiating, when your CEO and your president are rolling in to a deal and so potentially want a low price, because that's where they get marked. And at the same time, obviously, your control shareholder is the only one that can make an offer for you. It's not like there could have been other offers potentially made here if Silver Lake was unwilling, as it was, to sell its own stake.
All right. Can I pivot you while I have you to Disney?
Sure.
Since that's coming to a head. And, you know, the reports, including your own, would suggest there's a reasonably high level of Disney confidence, should I say, in the outcome, though that could obviously change. But what do we know now?
Yeah, I mean, we're still waiting for, obviously, the final tally. We should know something perhaps as soon as tomorrow morning, even though the annual meeting won't start until 1 o'clock Eastern time. Scott, from what I'm hearing right now, and again, I always want to caveat that, it does appear that Disney is certainly in a very good position to prevail here. Are they going to do so on some sort of crazy ratio of 70-30? No way. When you had ISS, the influential proxy advisory firm, go in favor at least of Nelson Peltz joining the board, that already made it much closer, perhaps, than might have been anticipated. But will they get something into the high 50s in terms of an overall percentage of votes in their favor? I think that is a possibility right now, from what I'm hearing. Again, we are still waiting to hear from, at least officially, from some of the larger firms. But again, Scott, from what I'm hearing right now, it does appear that Disney is likely to prevail, and Mr. Peltz and Mr. Razula will not be joining the company's board. That said, votes can change right up until the last minute. We want to make sure that that is part of anything we're sure to sharing.
Does the closeness of the vote in the end matter at all to what transpires next in terms of the way that, you know, Bob Iger leads this company forward? If it's much closer than we thought, if it's just a hair win, does that matter?
You know, if it's just a hair, it might matter, in the sense of they certainly would have to think, well, we had an awful lot of shareholders who were unhappy in certain areas. That said, I'm not sure that that's going to be the case. And given the emotion on both sides here, I don't really think that Disney, regardless, as long as it prevails, would do anything differently than it is. They've said that they are very much focused on succession, which has certainly been a key point that Mr. Peltz has been making, something that the Disney board, he says, and many agree with him, failed at the last time around. On execution, they say we're doing it. On cost cuts, we're doing it. So the argument has been, yeah, everything you say you want us to do, we're doing. Why do we need you? And it would appear, at least at this point, that Disney is in a position to prevail in that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of shareholders here. Jim, you've said you're on Team Peltz, but even if he loses, you're not selling.
Yeah, I think that's the clearest point I want to make is I'm definitely not selling if Peltz doesn't get on. My feeling about it is that he can't hurt. Just to what you were saying, I think if it turns out that Disney prevails, I don't think there will be an olive branch extended by Mr. Iger to Mr. Peltz. Just seems like there's been too much blood spilt on this. But, for guys like Surratt and me, we go to the operations. Yeah. And I keep saying this, if we're really 6 months away or less from profitability in Disney Plus, this is where the future of the business lies. Okay, this is what replaces linear television, which is obviously going away. Once you reach profitability, then you're having discussions like you're having about Netflix. How profitable? And that's a very positive place to be in with high gross margins. That's where I want to get to. That's where Mr. Iger wants to get to. That's why I wouldn't sell if Mr. Peltz doesn't prevail.
And to add to that one, if you look at all the stuff we were talking about, economy's stronger than we expected. Well, that means it's good for Disney. It's good for theme parks. It's good for their businesses. And that's why you want to own the stock. Things are going in their favor. The economy stays stronger. The sum of the parts is so much greater than the whole. And adding to what you said, the operating leverage that you get from streaming, you get actually a real multiple, and you don't get a discounted multiple.
And David, as you know, I mean, one of the greatest assets, so to speak, that Iger has in his pocket here is a stock price that's gone steadily higher over the course of the last many months, which helps his case tremendously.
Right. I mean, the last quarter in particular, and given the stock's reaction so positive to that last quarter when they had far less in terms of losses on streaming than was anticipated, talked about it becoming profitable by perhaps the September quarter or so of this year. Scott, that helped them a lot. Obviously, Mr. Peltz says, yeah, that's because we've been pressuring them.
You could spin two sides to every story.
And, of course, Disney says, no, that's not the case. We're just following the plan that we outlined more than a year ago.
Maybe a little bit of both as some things work out. Dave, thanks.
Sure.
David Faber, I appreciate your reporting on the Endeavor deal, obviously, and then your insight on Disney.